Sometimes in court, the truth is too fragile to be trusted, not because it's false, but because it won't survive the courtroom. Today, we're revisiting the O.J. Simpson trial, but not through DNA or gloves. We're looking at two witnesses you may have heard of that were never seen on the stand because they were never allowed near it. Why did the prosecutor keep them out? And what does that decision say about how justice really works? Let's go through an article that talks about this and let's all talk about it. I want to welcome you to Revealing the Crime. This is where we explore true crime, manipulation tactics, and the psychology behind criminal behavior, especially cluster B traits. This channel is for discussion and education, not diagnosis. Viewer discretion is advised, as some topics may be disturbing. Let's uncover the truth one case at a time. I've been watching the newest show on Netflix about O.J. Simpson. I think it's called American Manhunt, um, O.J. Simpson. And they were talking about these two witnesses that saw O.J. the night of the crime, and yet they were not called to testify. I personally have found the series pretty interesting because there are details in it that either I didn't know or I had heard but never really paid attention to. So if you're able to watch it, I highly recommend. Because I'm new to this, there are going to be certain words that I'm going to try not to say because I think YouTube flags them. But I hope that it becomes pretty clear what I mean when I say it. Okay, so the article says, or the article is titled Potential Witnesses in the O.J. Simpson Trial Who Were Never Called to Court Speak Out in Netflix docuseries. Two people who saw Simpson on the night of the events tell their stories. And this article was published shortly after the Netflix show was released. The article begins even 3 decades later, the O.J. Simpson trial still reverberates in the minds of those involved. He was famously acquitted on June 12, 1994, for the violent passing of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, who was a waiter and aspiring actor. They were brutally injured outside Nicole's condo in Brentwood, an upscale Los Angeles neighborhood. And I'm going to jump to the last paragraph here. It says, but the series also focuses on more under the radar details, including what it says here interviews with potentially key witnesses who saw Simpson on the night but were never called to testify in court. They always talk about means, motive, and opportunity. And I believe that these two witnesses, one of them provides evidence for opportunity, and one of them provides potential evidence for means. The first witness is Jill Shively. She says she was getting over the flu on the night of June 12th and needed to get food in her stomach. She left her Santa Monica apartment before 11 p.m. to drive to the Westward Home Market in nearby Brentwood, trying to get there before it closed. Driving east on San Vicente Boulevard toward Bundy Drive, less than a half a mile from where Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman had been fatally injured, Shively nearly struck a white Bronco with no headlights on, which had driven onto the median in order to avoid hitting another car in the intersection. Jill says, I could see who it was and I knew it was a football player, but I wasn't sure who. Shively, now 63, says, he was yelling at another driver, move, move. I recognized his voice because I had just seen a Naked Gun movie. It was O.J. Simpson. So let's talk about Jill Shively. This testimony could have put Simpson near the scene of the crime and was never heard in court. According to Simpson, this is what his evening went like. He claimed that he returned home around 7 p.m., spent time at his residence, attempted to contact his girlfriend, and prepared for an upcoming trip to Chicago. He actually specifically stated that between approximately 10:20 and 10:35, he was either lying or sitting on his bed, and around 10:40, he used the bathroom and took a shower, and that is when he heard the phone ringing. This timing is important because the estimated time of the crime is between 10:15 p.m. and 10:40 p.m. And it's based on The known activities of Nicole and Ron, the two victims, the barking of Nicole's dog, which neighbors heard around 10:15, and the timeline provided by witnesses, including O.J. Simpson's limo driver, Alan Park, who arrived at 10:25 p.m. to pick up O.J. from his home and didn't see Simpson's Bronco parked outside and didn't see any movement in the house until about 11 p.m. So this seems like it really places O.J. en route, allegedly, from Nicole's condo to his home at the right time. The timing makes sense. According to my research, it seems OJ and Nicole lived about 2.3 miles apart, and that's roughly a 5 to 7 minute drive depending on traffic. According to the limo driver, at approximately 10:54 p.m., he saw a figure wearing dark clothes walking across the driveway towards the house from the back area near the Bronco. Seconds later, lights turned on in the house. Simpson then answered the intercom saying he had overslept and just got out of the shower. And around 11 p.m., OJ came out and Park drove him to the airport. The limo driver's account directly contradicts OJ's claim that he was home the entire evening. And Jill Shively strengthens the limo driver's claim because allegedly OJ wasn't home. He was driving with his headlights off half a mile away from Nicole Brown Simpson's home. So let's get into the problems. It turns out Jill sold her story for $5,000. She has said that she regrets that to this day. The next witness is Skip Junis. He was parked outside LAX just after 11:30 p.m. on June 12. He was waiting to pick up his wife, an American Airlines employee, when he saw a limo pull up about 40 feet away. Out stepped O.J. Simpson, he says. Junis, an advertising executive who played baseball at UCLA when Simpson was at USC, recognized him immediately and found it odd that the A-lister was holding a cheap gym bag. I think it's important to mention this connection that Skip has to sports because it shows that if there were anyone to recognize him, Skip would. It brings credibility, I believe, to what Skip saw. The article continues with Skip saying, OJ went to a trash can and plopped the bag on top. What was really peculiar is when he unzipped the bag, he pulled out a long item that was covered with a white rag or cloth and put it in the trash can. After he learned about what had happened that night and that Simpson was a suspect, Junis says he called both the prosecution and the defense teams to report that he could place him at LAX that night, but neither team called back. I'm surprised he called the defense, honestly. That's a wild thing to see, right? Yikes. Later on in the article, both Jill and Skip say that they feel haunted by what they saw and by the silence that followed. Let's talk about why the prosecution didn't use them. These are two people that could have strengthened the case against OJ. Why were they pushed aside? The answer is both strategic and heartbreaking, so let's walk through it. People think that court is about telling the truth, but seasoned prosecutors know it's about what survives cross-examination. A weak witness, even if they're right, can damage the whole case, and Marcia Clark and the rest of the prosecution knew that. One of the biggest mistakes that Jill Shively made was to sell her story for $5,000. This turned her, in the eyes of people that saw, from an eyewitness to an attention seeker in the court of law. The defense would have ripped her apart, not just for the money, but for the implication. If she'll sell her story once, what else would she say to stay relevant? And then there's Skip. His story is very chilling. OJ, a gym bag, a trash can, and an item that no one can explain. But Marcia had no bag to show, no photo, no physical evidence. It was just a man's memory. And in a courtroom where doubt is a weapon, that wasn't enough. Clark knew what the defense would do. They would shift attention, challenge credibility, and confuse the narrative. If either one of these witnesses, Jill or Skip, cracked under the pressure, or they were painted as unreliable, it could cast doubt on the entire prosecution team, and Clark couldn't risk that. Even strong testimony can become dangerous if the victim becomes the story. This wasn't just a trial, it was the trial of the century. Every detail was televised, every sound bite was spun, and in that climate, the prosecution had to make some brutal calls. These weren't just witnesses, they could be seen as risks, and she had to protect the case, not just present the truth. Both Jill and Skip say they still think about it, they feel dismissed, they feel they had something important to say. And they did. They did see something incredibly important. And I agree with the strategy that played out. I could see how the defense could really damage their testimony. And that's what's so tragic about this story. In the courtroom, sometimes the truth isn't always enough. I want to finish out this video with a couple of thoughts that I have. So I think ultimately this decision came down to risk versus reward. Jill had sold her story to a tabloid, and it raises questions about credibility. Skip had no physical proof, no photos, no timestamps, just a claim of what he saw. In a case like OJ's, where there is a lot of scientific and forensic evidence that is already overwhelming, prosecutors may have felt that shaky witnesses could actually dilute their case. But in trials where the scientific evidence might be weaker or it might be more circumstantial, imperfect eyewitnesses can tip the balance, helping to create reasonable doubt or strengthen a timeline. And I just think this is also fascinating to look at the big picture, to look at the strategy that was used, that the prosecution thought would put the best case forward. So I want to ask you, what would you have done? Would you have taken the risk? Should a prosecutor go with their strongest case, or should they go with the fullest truth? Let me know in the comments. Was the prosecution, including Marcia Clark, right to leave them out? Or did we lose something important when we choose strategy over story? If this video was interesting to you, please like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you'll know every time I drop a new video. I have another channel called Revealing the Narc, where I talk about celebrities and their narcissistic moments. And I'm going to drop that info. That would be in the description of this video. I want to thank you all so much for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.